All right, good morning and welcome back to Daybreak. We're still discussing the news review, and I want to introduce someone who has just joined us, Honorable Gladys Boss Shollei from Kwandara constituency. Karibu sana, how have you been?
I have been fine. Thank you, Sam, for having me this morning.
All right, it's good to see you as well.
I know I've been a bit difficult to get. You know, the year did not start very well for all of us.
All right.
Yes.
Oh yes, I remember how it started, but all the same, we're glad that you're here. And the High Court has temporarily suspended the trial of former Treasury Cabinet Secretary Henry Rotich and his PS.
And as Mashirima Kapombe reports, Richard Malemba, who is accused alongside CS Rotich, Kamau, and 26 others, obtained orders from the High Court. Here are the details of this story.
Ngugi had earlier given reprieve to Richard Malebe, who is identified as accused number 27 in the 63 billion shillings Aror and Kimorer Dam scandal. Malebe had opposed one of the charges, which is conspiracy to defraud the public. He says his rights were violated when he was arrested and charged alongside Rotich and others. Trial Magistrate Douglas Ogoti, however, levelled the playing field for all the accused who are jointly charged in the dam scandal.
Count 1 is a conspiracy charge involving all accused. In staying prosecution against accused 27 effectively means even if the court was to proceed, then count 1 would also be suspended.
The suspension of the case for 30 days is meant to allow the DPP to report back to the trial court before a new date for pre-trial is set. Rotich and his co-accused were last year charged with conspiracy to defraud the public, willful failure to comply with procurement procedures, as well as engaging in a project without prior planning. Other charges include abuse of office, committing an offence of financial misconduct, fraudulent acquisition of public property, and willful neglect to perform official duty.
The mention will be on 26th March 2020.
They were in July last year released on a bond of 50 million with one surety of a similar amount or 15 million cash bail. Mashirima Kapombe, Citizen TV.
All right, that's a story about Henry Rotich, the former cabinet... He's actually
CS,
former, right?
Yes. Former
Cabinet Secretary Henry Rotich on the postponement. Okay. The case has been postponed. I want us to take a look at another story so that we can contrast the two. Honorable Gladys Boss Shollei will read that for us. If you can see that far. Let's go.
NYS scandal suspect Phyllis Ngirita broke down outside Milimani courts after the court failed to lift an order freezing her bank accounts. In her passionate plea, Jerry said she needed to pay school fees for her own son who attends Pembroke School in Gilgil, where she now owes some Kenya shillings 3.4 million. And she lamented that her son can no longer speak German and has now turned into a chokora who can only converse in Kiswahili, Kikuyu, and English.
Niko na mtoto anasoma, mtoto aliwacha shule. Mtoto sasa ameelekea kuwa chokora. Mimi huwa najifanyia pesa zangu. Pesa zangu zote ziko NYS, ziko paid in bills. Na mimi nimerequest tu wanifungulie tu account na nipe pesa kwa kukopa. Wamekataka kufungua hiyo account. So mtoto hata hawezi ongea Kijerumani. Mtoto anaongea ni Kikuyu na Kiswahili ama Kizungu. Sasa mtoto amekuwa nikuja kuona vile nadhulumiwa kwa koti kila siku. Diritas wametolewa kwa sacrifice, na mimi naomba president penye yako list ya NYS, hao watu wangejaa SGR, hao watu wako wapi? Hao watu wako wapi? Sisi tunateseka tukiambia 9 billion. Sasa hivi mtu huwezi enda muombe maji ya kunywa, wanaonanga tu 9 billion. Magari zetu zinaozea Naivasha police station. Magari hata zilikuwa na deni. Hakuna masiku wameongea kuhusu hiyo gari. Sasa nitatoka hapa na huyu mtoto naelekea na matatu nyumbani. Gari yangu inaozea police station, nilinunua malipo ya polepole. Wakasema sisi tulipa 9 billion. Mimi naomba president aitishe hiyo list ya NYS. Kwa sababu hiyo list ilikuwa na watu wengi sana, lakini Giritas wanatolewa ka sacrifice. Na mimi naomba kabisa president asikie hii maneno, kwa sababu mtoto wangu ako class 7, mtoto amekuwa chokora, nilikuwa naweza kujitafutia. Na hii si maisha. Passport walininyang'anya, kalikuwa napewa usaidizi Kijerumani. Siwezi hata banda ndege miaka 2 tumedhulumiwa. Mimi naomba kabisa, mimi nataka kuona president Nimeomba sisi tumesacrifice sana. Hiyo ni maisha gani tunapitia? Mtoto sasa nikitoka mkienda police station Naivasha, gari zetu zinataka decoration. Hata wajui vile tulinunua hiyo gari. Gani NYS hiyo hiyo kazi familia 2002 tutaki kuwa na kitu yetu. Wame-exaggerate, wanasema nyumba zote za Naivasha ni zetu. Hii ni maisha gani tunapitia? So inatakana na basi kukuwa na koti ya maskini na tajiri. Tukifika hapa wanaongea hivi. Pesa zetu wameshatunyang'anya wakisema tulipa 9 billion ziko wapi? Sisi mimi naomba president asikie hii maneno kwa sababu kuna watu wanaangamizwa bure.
All right, so that's the plea from one of the accused, that is Phyllis Ngirita, as well read by Honorable Gladys Boss Shollei. And when you look at these two cases, so on one side you have Henry Rotich's case has been suspended after one of the co-accused, that is Richard Malebe, obtained orders staying his prosecution. And on this other hand, you have a suspect lamenting that they are not able to access even basic services for their children. I mean, how do you... what is your reaction to this as you look at the interest of the accused as well as the people that are their dependents?
I think to the extent that they have been taken to court, considering that it is possible that they don't have any other means of income and you are innocent until proven guilty. I think she has a big point and issue that needs to be considered. She's speaking to her case being expedited, being processed within good time, so that they can determine whether this particular money was part of the NYS money or scam, so that then they can make a quick decision. Obviously, she may have to, and I think it has taken time. Looking at, I think, Ariel last year, these cases actually, in my view, because we agree that we should have some special courts dealing with the matters. And also Kenyans are waiting for solutions. Kenyans are waiting for either convictions or some results. So I think if we, I know there is a bit of drama in the way maybe she's speaking to the matter, but I think the fundamental issue is, when will this case and others be completed? Of course, you have seen that Rotich and team have gotten some reprieve. I would say, of course, it is still their right to approach the High Court, and that's why, under the Constitution, you can ask the High Court to stop the case for a while. I don't think it is determination. It's pending the hearing of the High Court reference or constitutional reference. So that means it would even take longer, because now the High Court will take its time. There is a possibility you can also appeal against the High Court decision to the Court of Appeal before you can now come, if ever you come back, to the trial court at the magistrate's level.
Right. Honorable Boss, coming to you, just picking up from what your colleague is saying, when you see how the courts are handling these different corruption cases, what is your own professional viewpoint on that, and how is it that politics goes ahead to influence court proceedings?
I think on the issue of the Ngirita case, I think I'll just agree with what Honorable Wahome has said, that there has to be a balance between fairness, justice, and being able to catch those who are found to be corrupt. And I agree with her on that. What I'd like to really comment on is Justice Mumbi Ngugi's decision. And it is something that I'm asking the press to look into. If you look at all corruption cases against public officials, they have the same charges exactly. Conspiracy to defraud, failure to plan, willful failure to comply with procurement rules, prior planning. The question, if you look at conspiracy, the conspiracy to defraud, you would have to show that they had meetings, the whole 47 of them had meetings, plotted, and there was actually what they call, what do you call it, the mens rea, that they planned to defraud the government, and it was deliberate, and that they did it jointly. It is not something that people can be charged with separately. So it is a very difficult charge to prove. And many times I've spoken to, in order to complete corruption cases on time, it's about the strategy of the kind of charges that you want to charge the people with. So there are certain ones that you may decide as a matter of strategy, let's forget conspiracy, because it will take too long to be able to prove, or you might not even be able to get the evidence
or even
that there was in fact a conspiracy, and therefore it will be difficult to even get a conviction.
So why does
I have been able to study a lot of the corruption cases where they are saying there is conspiracy. Then when I look at the witness statements actually do not reveal any conspiracy at all. So immediately I can know with complete precision that those people will never be convicted of conspiracy to defraud. Let's talk about failure to plan. Failure to plan, it's not been set out in statute what planning is. But we assume that planning it is budgeted for,
right.
It is approved by the board or approved by cabinet, and that Parliament approves the appropriation of the fund for that particular project. Okay. So if all that has been done, how then will you prove failure to plan? Because there is no other, such the statute books, there is nothing that sets out for us what planning means. Again, it tells you it's lack of strategy in the way that you plan. And therefore, I do agree with Justice Mumbi's decision, because Justice Mumbi is looking at it in those terms. Okay. Because as a judge, she's expected to ensure, because what they were doing is going for judicial review to the High Court to say, these charges are impossible for us to defend, because if they can't be proved, how do you defend yourself?
Okay, before we bring in Honorable Wanga, Kenyans then would be asking, why is it that DCI then presents such complicated cases before court?
It's something that I have mentioned it many times in public, and I said the war on corruption, it's not, you can't just blame the judiciary or blame the DPP or blame the DCI. It has to be, all of them have to work uniformly together. Because the moment remember when someone is charged, you're entitled by law to get all the witness statements. When you read the witness statements, it can tell you if those witnesses are actually giving evidence against you. And I'm a living example of that kind of thing. When I read the 22 witness statements that were against me when I was charged, none of them accused me of any wrongdoing. So you ask yourself, so why are you parading the 22 witnesses? Just to buy time? So it's a very serious matter, and it is something that must be looked into. I think it is something that is in the hands of Parliament.
All right.
Because I think Parliament has to look at amendments to the laws. I know that there was someone, I can't remember which member of Parliament, has brought before the Justice Legal Affairs Committee some recommendations on amendments to the laws in order to make it easier for the DPP to find a charge. Because I think right now he's grappling to it. Failure to comply with procurement regulations. By the way, the procurement law itself says that if you fail to follow any of the procurement regulations, but in good faith, it was by mistake, then it cannot be an offense against you. Yet again, there is another offense called willful failure to follow procurement regulations. Yes, one is saying good faith. But again, the law doesn't clearly tell us which ones amount to willful. Okay. Because what you'll be proving is willful as opposed to good faith. Corruption cases are extremely complex. Hence the reason why Kenya will not win the war on corruption until we improve the laws, improve our strategy, and make sure that there is an interagency cooperation in the manner in which they approach it. But
Kenyans would imagine that that's what has been happening. It would be unfortunate that would not be successful. But Honorable Wanga, when you listen to Phyllis Ngirita there with her cry, this is what ordinary citizens go through every other day when they are seeking justice in the courtrooms, and even most of them are advised, please don't pursue that path as you seek justice, don't go to the judiciary. How do you balance? Because when you look at those who are well-to-do, they're able to go to court, have some of their assets frozen, but they're still able to remain liquid in the economy. How do you balance the interests of those people that you'd consider not to be well up like the rest?
Yeah, well, first of all, let me just say that I think Ngirita is very, very dramatic. Listen to her example, that her child is a chokora because he can't speak German. Really? My children don't speak German. They are not chokoras. They speak English, Kiswahili, and a bit of Kijaluo. She says her children are chokora because they speak English, Kikuyu, and
but give it to her. Her fortunes have changed. And she's not able to access money to finance her.
So it's where this money came from, and I think we are going to have to be very, very firm if we are going to fight the war against corruption. And let me just say, despite the things that have been said, and some of which I agree with by my two colleagues, we must give it to DCI and DPP, because previously we could not even see some of these cases going as far as they went to courts. But let me finish with Ngirita. And one of the proposals that we have made, even during this BBI process, is around how long it takes to resolve corruption cases. And this was a problem we had with even election petitions in the past. Your election petition would drag in court until the next election. It would be determined 6 months to the next election, 4.5 years later. And I think when we corrected this and said election petitions must be had within 6 months, we have given justice to people, and when you go to appeal, it's a year. So by last year, we finished with all issues of our election petitions, and this is the same thing we should do with these corruption cases, so that justice is given in a reasonable amount of time, so that people are not, being dragged through the mud for so long, and their whole lives being disrupted. Because you look at some people who've been charged, for example. I mean, they're young people, they're young professionals, say. If your case takes 5, 6, 7, 10 years in court, really, your whole life
But Honorable Wanga,
is gone.
Here we are talking about justice and, a fair game. We all know there are other candidates under NYS Kando who stole.
Suspects, yeah.
Their accounts are not as frozen as, or rather the sort of pressure that is being seen on Ngirita is not being seen on the other NYS.
I think they're just out there screaming.
Justice and being fair, really, are the courts being fair?
I couldn't know, the circumstances facing. I know Lillian, who was the former PS, also had her accounts frozen, and the people who, Zinzi, what is the logic behind freezing accounts? It is that people have been suspected to have stolen public money. You go to the accounts and find huge amounts of money. Now, you're not sure whether this money is from the proceeds of that theft. Then you leave those accounts open and you continue with the case. Then they remove all the money and you continue with the case, and finally find that money actually belonged to the state. You see, it's a zero-sum game. But so the freezing, there just has to be a balance. But for me, I'm not taken in by the drama that I've seen from Ngirita. To be honest with you, I am not sympathetic. If you, because Ngirita has to tell us what was she doing before getting millions and millions of shillings into her account. She can continue doing those things, because if truly she had a business that was making for her money, and that is the money that is in her account, she should continue that business so that money continues to go into other accounts. But you see, she's depending just on that money. So I think we can't have our cake and eat it. If we are going to fight corruption, we must fight. Whether people are crying, whether they are crawling, whether they are jumping, whether they are chokoras, whether, we must fight.
No, but you see, Sam, let me just weigh in a little. You see, we cannot allow the face of Ngirita to actually be the face of the NYS scandal. Because we know it was a big, scandal. It was big loss to the country. Of course, some money never got lost, but we still politicized. But there is sufficient amount of money which is actually not with Ngirita. I think that's where we should be addressing ourselves and our thoughts and our activity. And I mean, this girl could have been involved in these things. And yeah, I mean, people don't react the same and are not affected the same by these kind of processes. But I think leaving it too long also speaks to the question, were we ever serious about this case, or to get the real people who stole the NYS money? Or we are just leaving it there so that we can appear like we have a case, like we are following. I think this was one of those cases that maybe the DPP and the DCI needed to leave other things. The way it was dramatized, the way it hit Kenyans, the way it destroyed NYS program for the youth, I think we should have put all our energies to ensure that actually the real culprit, because I don't think Ngindita is the real culprit in this case. So there is still a problem. And then why is the judiciary, maybe, is it 16 months now? It's over 1 year down the line, still allowing this case to remain in the courts.
Okay. All right, we want to take a short break. When we return, excuse me, we'll be talking about the conversation around Building Bridges initiative. There are certain quarters that have said that they are no longer part of the BBI. There are calls from Central Kenya that we saw at the funeral of Senator Irungu Kangata's funeral yesterday. Some of the leaders there asking for clarity on this BBI and also being offered an opportunity that there will be a rally in that region. So we'll be having that conversation after the break. But first, we take the break,
Let's take that break, yes.
Okay, all right. I thought we should look at some feedback, but it's okay. We'll do that later on.